and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be my most surprising and best reads of 2020. This was kind of a hard video to do, and I realized after watching a few other creators do their versions of this video as well that we all were kind of in the same boat, and that 2020 was just a really weird reading year. Not very many of us seem to feel the passion that we normally do towards reading. Because I was home, there was like this expectation that I would read more. That didn't happen. And then there was also like this weird feeling like I need to escape, but it's not doing enough for me. And I had a very terrible time, one with a reading slump, but also just like not feeling in the mood. Like I was looking for something very specific and could never find it. I started and did not finish so many books this year just because I wasn't in the mood. It wasn't because there was anything wrong with the book. I just wasn't in the mood. The books that I did read, I just didn't feel as connected to as I feel like I normally would. And then I was like, I probably don't even have any books for this video. But then I made a list and it's long. So here we go. There's no order to this. I'm just going to talk. You know, some of these books I have, some of them don't. I feel like I'd like to own all of these books eventually someday because I just really enjoyed them, okay? Let's start off with probably my first really surprising read of the year that I even remember in my review being like, this surprised me. And that's How to Be a Good Creature. This is a nonfiction and is about this woman who was essentially kind of disowned by her family because she wanted to, you know, research animals and whatnot. This particular book talks about 10 different animals that she comes in contact with, whether she owned them or studied them or whatnot, and how they affected her life in some way, and the things that each of these animals taught her on how to be a good creature. It follows dogs, there's an octopus, like there's a variety of animals. It's not just like pets that she had, although there are pets that she talks about, and it just was really so heartwarming. It was such a good read, and I think it is a book for all ages. At first I thought it was a J book, I thought it was middle grade, but I don't believe that it is. But I do think that any age could read this and enjoy it. I personally listened to it, which I thought was great, but the physical copy has illustrations and pictures in it, which were just stunning. One thing that you will notice in most of my favorites of the year, they ended up getting tabs in them of some sort because those tend to be the books that I'm most engrossed in. It just makes the most sense. But another one that surprised me with just how much I ended up loving it is The Best Laid Plans. I tend to love a good YA contemporary romance of some sort. I just think that they are so fun and cute, and I just love them. However, this one, I was surprised by just how much I loved it and connected with it, and just thought it was such a great way to talk about virginity and sex in a high school level. Because I remember, like, the things that are happening in this, they go to parties, and it felt very realistic. It was very reminiscent of my own high school years, but it is about this girl who finds out that at first she thought that she and one other girl were the only virgins left, but then she finds out that this girl loses her virginity, so she feels the pressure to lose her virginity as well. She asks her best friend here to take her virginity, especially because she starts seeing an older guy and she's afraid that he will think that she is inexperienced, and just everything about this was so much more reminiscent than I was expecting. Like, it hit home a little too much in parts, but I loved the chemistry. This has like some of my favorite scenes just like between best friends who are awkwardly trying to get through life. As you can tell, so, you know, things progress, but this just hit home in some aspects. But the only disappointment that I really had in this was the ending. I never see anyone talk about this. I don't think anyone really talked about this, and I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. So another one that took me by surprise was The Weight of Lies. This is a mystery thriller that I just kind of picked up. It looked kind of interesting, and what really ended up surprising me about this one is how much I ended up falling in love with the trope of like where from the perspective of the child of a famous author. This became something that I was actively seeking out this year, and all because of this. This just really solidified that love. But this follows a woman who, her mother is a very famous author. There's like a cult following behind her mother, and her mother has written a series that is like a murder mystery type book, but there are all these forums about how, like, she actually committed the murder and where it happened and all this stuff. So she, you know, she's done with her mother's shenanigans. So she decides she's going to write her own book about how terrible her mother is. But she wants to find out the truth for herself. So she ends up going to the place that this book is written around and trying to uncover these secrets. There's much going on, but I loved finding out all the little details about their lives. I also liked kind of looking into like the cult following behind her mother, and this was intense in parts that I wasn't expecting, and this was just so good. It was probably my favorite like mystery thriller of the year, and again, another underrated pick that I feel like I don't see anyone talk about. I do think it is a few years old, but still, I just really fell in love with that author parent trope, and I think we saw it in Home Before Dark, and I'm trying to remember, there was another one that I read that also had this in it, but it just is something that I have found that I really enjoy. I don't know what it is about it. Coffee down for this because I need all my arm strength for this one. But the next one, again, tabbed up, Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood, whatever the heck you want to call it. No, this is not in the best of the best, because I do think that there was a good amount of this book that probably could have been condensed a little bit, but this one really took me by surprise. This was probably the most surprising read on here. Not necessarily because it's by, like, here's the thing. This was a roller coaster, okay? This follows a young woman and her best friend is killed, but there's some mystery behind her best friend being killed and the murder of it, and you know, there's some weird things going on, and she ends up being kind of pulled into like this dark part of this kind of urban fantasy world, and an angel type thing is kind of looking over her, but he's a very hot angel thingy. So I don't know how best to explain this, because there's a lot of layers to this, honestly. Obviously, there's a lot going on here. This was a roller coaster. I started out being like, everyone tells you the first part of it is very emotional, and I was like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. I was not expecting to be as impacted as I was within the first few pages of this. Especially, like, I feel like it takes some power in order to make me emotional about a character I barely know. So I was pretty, you know, impressed by that. Then the middle of this is just like 300, 400 pages of cock blocking. That's it. That's all you really need to know. And kind of a little bit of a detective story. It was, I was just like, whatever. I was like, oh no, this is gonna make it into my disappointing reads list. I really thought it, because I was not impressed. Then we get to the ending, and oh my gosh, what a whirlwind of emotions. I cried, I sobbed, I was angry, I was screaming. Like, all the emotions I could feel, I felt it in the last few pages. Not the last few pages. It was like the last 100 pages of this are wild. And it really solidified it as being a great book for me. Again, I don't think it is like the best Sarah J. Maas writing. I knew going into this that I was probably going to enjoy it, because I love Sarah J. Maas's writing. It's addictive. I love her characters. They're just entertaining. You know, I just love these stories. But this one wasn't my favorite, but I do think I was ultimately very surprised at how emotionally connected I ended up being to these characters and how much emotion it ended up evoking from me. So then we have a Blade So Black. I figured I was probably going to like this. However, I kind of told myself in the past year, and I do think I mentioned it a few times on my channel, that I'm kind of done with fairy tale retelling. Some that still interest me, but I've just had to take a step away for the time being, because I feel like I've just read too many of them currently. So I'm going to take a step away from fairy tale retellings for the time being. I ended up picking up a Blade So Black. Also, Wonderland retellings can be different because you can kind of create a Wonderland all your own. So I'm always intrigued by what Wonderland looks like. A young girl who can see nightmares, which essentially come from Wonderland. And she is being taught by Hadda, who comes from Wonderland, in order to fight these nightmares. However, because young black kids are being killed and she's more and more worried about what this is doing to her family and whatnot, she decides that she's going to step away. However, things happen, and of her friends are kidnapped and things like that, and there's some crazy things happening in Wonderland. So she ends up having to stay on as a nightmare hunter, whatever, in order to, you know, continue on. So I like that this was different. Like, this just took the bare basics of Wonderland and the characters and made them all their own. It's an urban setting. It takes place with very contemporary problems and things like that. So I just loved it. I thought this was so fresh. It's so exciting. I love these characters. I have multiple ships happening. So I just really enjoyed this, and I flew through this series overall, and then only to realize that it wasn't complete yet. I was so upset because I thought it had been done. The last one had been published, but no, friends, no. And I don't remember. I think that the last one is coming out this year, but I'm very nervous. I'm just very nervous. But this one just took me by surprise by just how much I became invested in it. I knew pretty quickly that I was going to like it, but just how much I became invested in the characters, and that, like, it's been a while since I really wanted to binge a series, and this was the first one in a while, so I can't believe I did not realize it wasn't finished. But another one that I feel like not enough people talk about. If you're looking for Alice in Wonderland retellings, this is definitely high up there. I became very much invested in contemporary, like, romantic fiction this year. Get a Life Chloe Brown was one that I really enjoyed, and one that just took the top spot for me was just total 5 stars. I sat down and read it in a whole day because it just, like, engrossed me so much, was Beach Read. I honestly went into this thinking, you know, I tend to enjoy most contemporary romance type stories, but I wasn't expecting anything like fantastic, but I loved this. I love the characters. I think what was most interesting is that the male love interest in this is basically my type. So I think that was what was most interesting, and it's the point of view of 2 authors. So this follows a girl whose father has passed, and she realizes he's been living a double life. He has this cottage that he has kind of never, beach house type thing that he's never told her about, and so she goes there and finds out that he had this whole second life there. So she inherits this, and she decides that it's a perfect time to fix it up, sell it, and in that time she's going to finish writing her book. She's known as a women's fiction writer, and what happens is that she ends up being beside her arch nemesis, who is also an author known for writing literary fiction, and they strike up this deal because there's this whole dialogue about how, like, women's fiction, why it's, you know, titled that way, how it's just literary fiction, but it just has, like, women in it, you know. There's a whole dialogue about this, and it's great. But they end up striking up this thing that he will write a romance, and she will write a literary fiction, essentially. And they have to go on these, like, field trips, I guess, together in order to learn each other's crafts and whatnot. So, of course, for hers, it's kind of like they're a little bit of fake dating in a way. So I just really enjoyed this. I thought the chemistry between the characters was so good. I loved the kind of dialogue and the discussions about marketing in the literary world and things like that. So I just thought this was really well done. I love these characters. I thought this was just a great story, and I'm interested to see more from this author. I have 2 more in this most surprising category, one of which is the subtweet. I raved and raved and raved about this when I read it because this is, I feel like this story is summarized in a very simplistic manner for what it actually is. I, like, begged Book Talks to talk about this book because there are so many layers to this book that just need to be looked at and analyzed, and it's definitely something that you can reread and find something each time to look at about current society, about social media, about navigating friendships in the modern world, things like that. And this is basically about a woman who is a musician, and she ends up befriending another person who does, I believe, like, covers and whatnot, and things that happen, and how social media grew their friendship but also was the demise to their friendship. And it talks about like, the music industry in modern, like, there's so many layers to this story, and it is so good. So good. It's more of just like, these are the events that are happening in life. Like, life never stops. So I thought that it was just really refreshing. It was really interesting. It made me think a lot. I was like having moments where I had to stop and I was just like, this is life. Like, these are the things in modern society to have discussions about, and I just thought it was such a great look into those things. And then the last one, which somehow only managed to get 3 tabs in it because I don't think I had my tabs while I was reading this, but that is Kingdom of the Wicked. This that I was probably going to enjoy it, but I did not expect to enjoy it as much as I did. It's been a really long time since I wanted to write fan fiction about something. Here it is. I just loved this world and these characters so very much. It is based around the 7 deadly sins, and now I want to write a book about the 7 deadly sins, and it basically personifies them in that they are princes of hell. And this follows a girl who has a twin sister. They are witches, but they have to hide their powers away from the world because witch hunters exist. And they've been told throughout their whole life that like these demons and these princes of hell will come and they will steal their hearts, basically. They'll rip them out. So they kind of think that this is like hogwash, doesn't exist. That is until one day our main character finds her twin sister dead and her heart has been ripped out. She ends up believing that she is going to summon a lesser demon to figure out who has killed her sister, but instead she summons Wrath, a prince of hell. And he has a similar agenda to her. So they decide to team up and try to figure out who is killing witches, because it's now a spree. There's witches being killed all over town. So yeah, I just was really intrigued by this. I loved this world. I love this writing. I love Wrath. I love him a whole lot. Just saying, just saying. This story, I just was so captivated by this story, and I just love the overall premise of it. I just feel like it's something new and refreshing and unique. It's a hate to love kind of thing going on. I don't know if hate to love, maybe a hate to lust type thing going on, and it just works so well. I just really ended up enjoying it. I enjoyed it way more than I expected to. I was way more intrigued in it than I expected to be, but it was just a really great time. Now we're going to move on to the section that is great reads. Not quite the best reads, but great reads of the year. And the one that I recently finished that I just feel like I have to talk about, like, these could probably be in best reads, honestly, but I don't know, they just fit into great reads in my mind. But one of the ones that I finished last of the year was The Black God's Drums. This was so good. This is a alternative history kind of sci-fi type thing. It's very steampunk, and this follows a young girl, and I do believe it's based around, it's got like a nice mixture of mythology in it as well, and this is about a really young girl who finds out information about how the Confederates are going to be getting the Black God's Drum in order to kind of, you know, control the world. And she ends up teaming up with a captain of an airship in order to kind of hunt down these men and stop this from happening. It's a very short book, but it was very immersive in the shortness that it was. The writing was beautiful. I love the mixture of historical with futuristic, and I just love that they mashed together, and they just worked so well. At first I was thinking, I don't know how this is going to work out, but it worked so well. I love these characters. I loved the audiobook was fantastic as well. The narrator did a really great job with adding different accents to people. Overall, I would say this is probably up there and one of my favorite reads of like all time. It was just so good, and I do think that it is very underhyped. I don't know if I've really seen anyone talk about it, and it is just, I mean, it's fantastic. It's a really fast-paced read, and it fits so much character into such a little book, but it's so good. I could probably consider this one of my favorites. It just might have been something little that ended up keeping it from my favorites list, but I can't even believe that this was read this year because I feel like I read this 10 years ago, but that is Ninth House. Again, more tabbing happening, but this is just, I love that this is a dark academia book, but with a much more paranormal aspect. It's much darker than I was expecting. I knew it was going to be dark, but this is so much darker than I was expecting. It deals with a lot of really heavy topics as well. The magic system is much more unexpected and darker than I was expecting. So this could be a surprising read, but I kind of knew going into it I was probably going to enjoy it. But I ended up enjoying this way more than I thought it would, especially because the first half is really slow and it's really hard to get into. And I feel like I've seen a lot of people, they don't really like it because of the pacing of this book. And I do agree with some reviews that I think that the wording at times was just over pretentious. It was just unnecessary, especially because it is a more gritty read in my opinion. So the bigger words just didn't really fit with the overall feel of the book, I feel like. But this deals with Alex. She has a dark past, which we find out more of, but she has basically been saved in order to overlook these secret societies that are happening at this university, and she has been kind of put into this role because she has a very special gift that she can see ghosts. And there is a murder that happens, and she thinks that these secret societies might have something to do with this murder. She just has to prove it. Her mentor is also missing, and you know, we're trying to find out more about that as well. So I really enjoyed this. I just love this. I know that it's a very polarizing book, but this one just was up there in one of my favorite reads as well. Another really fantastic series that I started this year was The Trail of Lightning. This is so good. This takes Navajo mythology and it personifies it. We follow the main character, who is a monster slayer, and she has kind of lost her mentor, who is a god, and she is coming across these creatures which she thinks are being made. They're not like the normal monsters that she comes across. She thinks someone is making them, and she has to kind of figure out who is making them, and she teams up with a medicine man along the way, and they both have, you know, they have secrets of their own, but they have to figure out what is happening with these monsters before they kind of take over. So I really enjoyed this. There's other dark aspects going on. There's like it's a dystopian novel, and there's like these modern twists on things, and I love the kind of weird magic system that's happening as well. I loved the dark, gritty corners of the world. It was just so good. I love the main character. I cannot rave enough about this book. I feel like I talk about it all the time now. Since I've read it, I can't stop thinking about it. Originally, I was going to finish the second book before the end of the year, but then I was like, I want to save a good book to start off the year with, because the past few years I've started the years with really bad books. I ended up saying it because I know I'm just gonna love it, but I've really enjoyed the series so far. If you like mythology mixed in with dystopian, it's the one for you. Another one that I feel like could possibly have made it to the best section, but it is a very unpopular opinion here. And for that, I really loved Catherine House. I know most people did not enjoy this, and I feel bad because I do know that there were quite a good many of people who picked this up on my recommendation and disliked it. I'm sorry. I love this book so much. This is a dark academia book, but it is kind of sci-fi, I guess, in a way. It is very rhetorical. It has like this darker meaning to things. You definitely have to suspend your belief in some things and then also kind of dig deeper to find out the meaning of what is being said. Yeah, I can understand it's a little hard to get into because the beginning, you're not really sure what's happening. You're following this girl who has made it into this like school where very successful people leave the school, but they never talk about it ever again, and something weird has gone on there. So she gets in and she kind of just doesn't care. She is out partying, she's sleeping around, like just does not care. Then weird things start happening at the school, and you realize that there is a much weirder, darker sense of something happening, and she's trying to get to the bottom of it. This does follow the 3 years that she is there and the different relationships that she makes and some of the things that happen, and I can't give too much of it away, but this made me stay up till 3 a.m. questioning all my life choices. Just made me question so much. It was so good in my opinion, and I loved personally at the end. I felt it was open-ended. I feel like you could interpret it in a lot of different ways, and I am just like, the ending that I have in my head, I am shook by. But if you ever want to discuss what you think, how you think it ended, because my coworker and I got into it for like a 3-hour discussion at work one time about how we thought this ended. There were some things that I remember disliking about it. I can't tell you what they were right now, but I know it wasn't a full 5 stars. Most of my favorite books are not ever really full 5 stars. I don't understand, but I'll be of unpopular opinion here. My favorite anthology of the year probably goes to The Fire This Time. I feel like I just have to mention an anthology. I love short story collections, and this one was just so good. It is a collection of just stories and narrations about being Black in today's society and about the erasure of different histories and about what it feels like to be walking down the streets in these very racist communities. Just a very eye-opening collection, so well edited. If you're looking for any anthologies, this one's definitely top of the list. I feel like I don't talk enough about like my favorite anthologies, but this one is probably like #1. Why am I like, it's not even here. It's not, I don't have it in my hand. I'm like showcasing it like it's here. Okay, the last one that I have for this section, this probably would have made it in my top favorite reads of the year, in the best of the best. However, I accidentally read the abridged version of it. And I haven't, I'm giving myself some distance from it before I reread the unabridged version, but I just still can't believe that I read an abridged version. So I feel like I cannot fully put it in the best of the best because I haven't technically read the whole thing. That is The Historian. This book blew me away, at least the version that I read. It turns out that her father has kind of been pulled into this kind of secret society type thing. Basically how you become part of the secret society is that one day this book appears to you and it has the symbol of like Vlad the Impaler on it. Then you are now part of the society that is hunting down Vlad the Impaler. And basically, Vlad the Impaler is believed to still be alive, and he is a vampire. And this is believed, basically, we look at her talking about how her father is telling her stories about how he became part of the society and the research that he's done, but then he goes missing. So then we have her part of the story where she's talking about she kind of becomes part of ingrained in this society and finding her father and all this other stuff. There is a lot of like ancient libraries in here and researching and history mixed in, but there's also these personal relationships and things going on, and I just loved every aspect of it. I felt that it balanced all of these things so very well. It really balanced the kind of mystery aspect, it balanced suspense, it balanced these personal relationships, it balanced history, it balanced paranormal. There were so many good things mixed in here that just worked so well, and I was just blown away by how well this was done. And of course I had to buy a copy. I'm gonna cheat and say it's one of my favorites even though I haven't fully read it. Then we get into the very best of the best for me this year. So normally I would not include the further parts of a series in this video. I would just mention them like, hey, I continued this series that I enjoyed and still enjoyed it. But this is the exception because I feel like I didn't really read a lot of series this year or continuations of series. And this one I feel like I just have to keep raving about because it's so underrated. It's so underrated. I talk about it all the time and no one ever reads it, but it's so good, and I just thought this was one of the best endings to a trilogy ever. I thought this just held up so well with the rest of the series, and that is The Dark Days Deceit. This is the third in the Lady Helen trilogy. The first one is The Dark Days Club. I just feel like I have to mention this because I just love this world, this writing, these characters so very much. And it is definitely in my top favorites of the year. This is one of the books that I just ended up loving and loving and loving so much this year. And it just made me re-fall in love with this world. It's 1800s Demon Hunters. It's the best combination ever, and I've only ever read like 2 books like this. I'm always looking for more 1800s Demon Hunters, okay? Give me more. I also love the romantic tension between characters whenever it's written in the 1800s and there's like a more fantasy aspect to it. I love the ankle showing is scandalous. I'm here for it. I love that kind of tension. This follows Lady Helen. She's in a proper society. Her parents have been killed, and she ends up finding out that her parents have passed on the fact that she's a demon hunter. She comes across this whenever she has to pair up with a Lord Carlston. Now, Lord Carlston, he has some rumors about him that he possibly murdered his wife, and you know, he's unsavory, so she should not be seen with him. There will be rumors. But that doesn't stop her anyway. There's just this pull to Lord Cawston. Plus she has to be with him anyway because he's mentoring her in demon hunting. But there's this pull to him, and we just have to figure out all these secrets. There's the secret to the society, and there's things going on, and we're fighting the demons, and what dog will not stop barking. So many great aspects of this story. I just loved. It had just a really great historical, like, you have the society, you have enough action, there's enough romance, like, again, just a really fantastic mixture, and I just, again, thought this was one of the best third books in a trilogy. I tend to find that the third book tends to be the weakest in a lot of trilogies. This was not the case. I love this so very much. I don't actually own the other two books that are best of the best for me. I'm hoping to. I will probably be buying some copies, but next would be The Butterfly Garden. This just blew me away. There was just something about this. It was like watching something terrible happen and you just can't look away. Like, that's how I felt about it. This is a very disturbing book about the Butterfly Garden, which is essentially where these girls are kidnapped to, and this man who is, you know, like, he's the butterfly collector, takes these girls and he thinks that he is, like, saving them from something, but he takes them in, he tattoos butterfly wings on their backs, and collects them, and, you know, does what he wants with them, essentially. But whenever they are at their, you know, once they reach a certain age, or once he has no more need of them, he preserves them in a way and has quite the collection. This follows a young girl, and it is after the fact that something has happened at the garden. And we are now following a girl who is in FBI custody, and they are interviewing her. Interrogating her, I guess that would be the appropriate word, because she's acting kind of weird. She's, like, weird about it, and they're not too sure what she's being like. What is she saving here? Like, why is she being so weird? Why wouldn't she want to help these people? Why is she lying about things? So they think there's something more sinister also happening underneath of everything as well. This just, like, it was such an interesting premise. And it was so dark and twisted, and it was just so well done. And I just don't know how else to praise it. It's just so fucked up on so many levels, and I just could not stop listening. I was like, most of the shock factor happens pretty early, and then most of the book comes down to, like, day-to-day life in the garden, what it was like for them. But there's also, like, you're learning a little bit about her past as well, and how that plays a role into things. And, you know, the gardener, or whatever the heck he is, he has family as well. So we do get to hear a little bit more about his life as well, and different aspects, and just, like, the relationships between the girls. And it was just, it was like a really fucked up situation and making it mundane. And I don't know, it was just so good. I don't know how else to describe it. I do know as part of the series, I'm still conflicted about continuing the series, just because the Butterfly Garden was so good, and I'm just not too sure the other ones can compare in my mind. But everyone says they're just as good, so we'll see. And then the best book of the year, I feel like this shouldn't be a surprise, because I think when this was released, it's been, like, everyone's, like, favorite book. But Madeline Miller just has, like, solidified in, like, my top 10 favorite authors. And Song of Achilles was just fantastic. I basically listened to this in one day. She just does such really great kind of mythology retellings. And this is about Achilles, but we're actually from the point of view of Patroclus. And of course, they become very close. This is about Achilles and Patroclus's relationships together and their journey through life together. And of course, we all know about Achilles' heel. And it's kind of building up to that. But Madeline Miller's writing is just so mystical. I don't know how else to describe it. It's enchanting. You can't stop devouring the words. You just are her writing almost feels like it was written in the, like, time period that she is writing. Like, she just does such a good job at building the atmosphere. He makes these characters still so relatable. She does such a good job of showing their different emotions and their connections with each other and things like her writing is just brilliant. And this was just probably one of the best books that I personally feel like I've ever read. I loved reading about the relationships, and then of course there's a lot of inner turmoil happening and a lot of other things happening, and then, you have leading up to Achilles' heel and what that really means and how Patrobulus plays a part in all of this, and I just loved it. I loved it. I loved that it just feels very realistic of being put in these situations and having to pick. It's not convenient. It's messy, and I love that it shows this messy side, because we talk about like gods and mythology, like everything's set in stone, but Madeline Miller says, nuh-uh, we're just switching it up a bit. So I love that she gives these kind of underrated characters more of a story, and I'm so excited to see what else she comes out with. That's probably my #1 book. Like, that was the only one that immediately came to mind when I was thinking about this video, so there it is. Anyway, that is the end of my most surprising and greatest and best reads of the year. I know this was probably a long video, but what can I say? I just want to rave about books. Let me know what some of your favorites were from the last year. I'd love to hear. I don't know why. I've been standing on my tiptoes this whole time. Now my feet hurt. What am I doing? I don't know. I hope you guys have liked this video. Don't forget to subscribe to see future videos from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!